particular session. You're going to hear from some people on this panel that are doing some of the most exciting new things in the education space right now. They really are leading in very innovative and exciting ways, and things that will be instructive, I think, to you as you think about our nation's schools, and we're going to get a perspective from outside the country as well. The question we're often asking is these pockets of innovation and where they're really making a difference, how can some of these things scale? So this is what this panel is going to talk about today, and I know you'll be interested in hearing from them and then dialoguing with them. I'm going to turn it over to start the session, the moderator, Andy Calkins. We've kind of reconnected after a couple of decades. He has a long history in our industry. I'll let him introduce himself and his fellow panelists. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Vicki. And I'm gonna stand because we're all right after lunch, and these chairs are just too darn comfortable. Vicki, yeah, she just said we've reconnected after 2 decades. Vicki and I worked together in this space way back in the early 1980s, when we were agog with excitement over the advent of new technology like the Commodore PET and the Atari and the Apple IIe with its heart-stopping 64K of RAM. My God, how the world of technology has changed, and how the world of educational practice has largely not changed since then. And that's the setup for today's 1 o'clock panel, because what you're going to hear about today at 3 different ecosystem levels is about what the present future looks like. I was going to say what the future looks like, but it's happening right now, and all of this is really, I mean, Vicki, you and your team deserve a lot of credit for setting up a sort of arc of narrative that started with Karan this morning, doing the sort of big global picture, and then moving to the panel later in the morning that was really about the sort of provider side, all of the dynamics that are happening there, and then moving to the practitioner side here, and thinking about what the next generation learning experience of kids in American public schools is starting to look like, and what kind of roles, opportunities, and responsibilities fall to the people in this room and to the provider marketplace to help drive and shape and improve that. That's what we're going to spend the next hour doing. We've got a really impressive, wonderful group of panelists up here. Diane Tavenner is the founder and CEO of Summit Public Charter Schools, a network of 6 charters in California. They are in the raw invention space. And as you'll hear from Diane, they're not finding what they need to do the work that they want to do out in the marketplace and are having to invent it themselves. You'll hear next from John Covington. John leads the Educational Achievement Authority in Michigan. Both of these two are grantees of Next Generation Learning Challenges, which I work for, and I'll cover that in a second. But John's initiative is probably the nation's most interesting, most promising state and district partnership to help use the turnaround space in urban public schools to catalyze the design and development of wholly new kinds of schools built around personalized learning. And then we'll hear from Karan Khemka, am I getting your last name right? Who is the partner and co-head of the education practice at the Parthenon Group. And the next level up after district and state is country. And Karan is going to talk about a country, it's not ours yet, that is in process of making a complete and organized, coherent turn in the direction of these new kinds of educational practices. So that's what we're going to do. First, a couple of words about Next Generation Learning Challenges and the grantees that we, with money from the Gates Foundation and Hewlett Foundations, are catalyzing to help enrich the landscape of these new and different kinds of models out there. These are all, we've distributed about $50 million or so in the last 3 years. 21 of that has gone to a group of what will eventually be about 40 brand new personalized, competency-based, blended schools. You all know what all that means in theory, and there's a lot of, of lip service and gum flapping about what each of those terms means, but to really see what it looks like as part of a coherently reimagined school, you need to go to one of these new schools. Not that NGLCs are the only ones out there, but it is still a very new and very raw landscape of reimaginers and inventors. The two questions that I have asked myself and that I will then ask our panelists to consider for your benefit are to wonder about what these next generation tech integrated models need from the marketplace of providers in order for them to fulfill the promise that they have. And to make a prediction about what kind of influence and impact they are going to have on the greater education industry as a whole. My own answers to those questions are that the 40 grantees that we are working with right now, if they were all lined up here next to Diane and John, would say, I think, the following 4 things. They'd say, we need a Manhattan project of rich task, Common Core linked curriculum development. There's a lot of it out there, but a lot of it exists in silos of some of the charter networks and other places, or it's too embedded within very large curricular packages that a lot of these experimental schools can't have access to, or the districts may be reluctant to invest in. Secondly, they need much more sophisticated build-out of deeper learning forms of assessments. This is assessment beyond what's coming out of the 2 assessment consortia. Much more rigorous and comparable forms of performance-based assessment, and delivered on ways, this is the 3rd one, in ways that are integrated on a common IT platform that provides for curriculum, for assessment, and for coherent reporting out on an immediate, as-needed basis. That's the holy grail that all of our grantees would say they have been looking for from the marketplace, and the marketplace hasn't provided it yet. They would also say, in order for them to grow, in order for all of this to grow, there's a huge opportunity here for the service providers to line up around what some are calling Common Core Plus. That means helping districts and schools turn not just 5 degrees, with an increase in rigor of their standards when they adopt Common Core. That's good, but it's not enough to meet 21st century requirements. And right now, that capacity just does not exist out there. So we're waiting for, the provider marketplace to make some bets in this space and help to evolve it and to drive it. On the prediction, my answer to that question, I'm going to be asking you guys this same question, is that 5 years from now, I think probably 40% of American public schools will look very similar to what they look like right now, just because that's what American public education does. But 40% will have made a serious effort to ratchet up their expectations, the rigor of their teaching, the inquiry basis of their learning with students. A lot of that will be driven by the Common Core. A lot of it might be driven by curriculum and assessment and technical supports provided by all of you. And 20% of those schools will be in the midst of an effort to look very different in ways that you're going to hear about from Diane and John. I would say half of that 20%, though, will be doing it for the wrong reasons. They'll be doing it because under constant financial pressure, they will, even if they don't say this out loud, they will think this is a way for them to save some dough, and they would be wrong about that. And their models won't look as genuinely different and won't be as genuinely transformed an experience of what school is for their students as in the remaining 10%. 10% doesn't sound like a big number, but 10% of 100,000 schools is, 10,000 schools. So that would be okay, I think, and might be enough of a tipping point to help make the ensuing 5 years look very different from that. So with that, let me turn it over to our panelists, and we'll go from little charter network that could, really trying to roll a boulder up a mountain, to district and state after that, and to country after that.
Great.
Diane?
Thanks, Andy. Thank you. The teacher in me wants to make you all stand up and move forward right now, but I'll refrain from doing that. I might have anarchy if I do that. As Andy said, I'm Diane Tavenner, and I founded Summit Public Schools 10 years ago in Silicon Valley in California as a single 9 through 12 charter high school. And today we have 6 schools, all in the Bay Area. And they're schools that are ranked among the best public high schools in the country by U.S. News and World Reports and Newsweek and a variety of sources. Our mission is to prepare all of our students for success in college, career, and life. And 3 years ago, we had our first set of college-going data, so our first cohort of kids who had been 4 years out of school, and we could start to see where we were going to end up. When your mission's 100%, and you come in at about 55% of those students earning a college degree, you have to look in the mirror and say, what went wrong? Now, a lot of people looked at us and said, wow, you're amazing because you're, double, triple the national average and you're doing incredible work. But we said that's not good enough, and we operate on the California dollar, and so we knew we needed to do something cost-effective and while we had the students with us. And so that led us into a pretty deep dive into what was going on and what was going wrong. And the short version of that very long story is that what we found is very consistent across the country. Number one, students who go to college and have to take remedial courses, which all of you know is somewhere between 40 and 60% of our students, have a very small likelihood of actually persisting through and earning a 4-year degree. And even though our students were making it through a really rigorous program, there was still about 35% of them who had to take remedial courses. And the second piece was that in a charter network like ours and like many, where we're all about not letting kids slip through the cracks and making sure we provide high support, our students weren't actually going to college understanding how to own and drive their own learning and empowered to persist through the challenges and hurdles they ran into when they weren't with us any longer. And so those two sort of key problems we set out to solve 3 years ago. And we started with a blended learning program, what I would call today a traditional blended learning program. I know some people laugh at me that I'm calling it traditional, but I really do think it's somewhat traditional at this place. It's a classroom rotational model where kids literally moved through 3 stations, one with the teacher, one in a group work setting, and one on computers. And we partnered with the Khan Academy at that point in time to provide math supplementary instruction in a very personalized way, so kids worked on what they needed to work on. We saw some pretty amazing results that year in our ability to fill the gaps and the holes, and in our goal of never again sending a student to college who had to take a remedial course. What we also learned was this whole self-directed piece was very powerful and yet not conducive to the traditional sort of factory model schools that America currently has and operates in. And so that launched us on a whole user-based design process. We partnered with some of our Silicon Valley friends, Google and others, to really rethink the whole design of the school. And last year we did a much deeper, wider integration, and you're seeing some pictures of what that looks like right now, in a one-to-one environment, an open environment where kids actually were able to drive their own learning. We partnered with Illuminate Education to co-design and develop a platform where we curate playlists for students to work through. Each playlist corresponds to a micro standard aligned to Common Core with an online assessment system. So kids, when they're ready to assess, can go online, take the assessment, show what they know, and move forward at their own pace. And they really drive their own learning. And that year of work and design process led us into the ability to design what this would look like at a whole school model, so no longer just in math or for a third of the students' day. And so this fall, we've launched in all 6 of our schools a whole school model where kids literally are working through a blended competency-based progression for content knowledge, as well as really rich, rigorous teacher-facilitated projects for the higher level cognitive skills or the practice standards in Common Core speak, as well as a focus on what we would call the habits of success or non-cognitive skills, and 8 full weeks of immersive experiences or expeditions in the community, in internships and things like that. So this whole school model is really what we imagine the future of education looks like. It's the flipping on its head of the factory model school, where we go from a very adult-centered, adult-centric environment where we tell kids what to do, when to show up, where to go, what to learn, when to do it, how to show us, to a very student-centric environment where kids are driving their own learning. They're setting their own goals. They're achieving them. They're working at their pace, with some nudges and encouragement because their pace sometimes is a little bit slow, and where they really are being empowered to be learners well into the future, all aligned to college and career readiness standards. And so that's really what the new environment looks like, a very student-centric approach to learning. And as Andy suggested, as we've moved to that, technology is just infused in this experience. It's a one-to-one environment, and the kids have their technology with them. They take it just like we do as adults everywhere they go. And what we've discovered in the process is there's a lot of things that we were hoping would exist to support this that just don't. And so we've taken a multi-pronged approach where we are buying what we can, we are co-designing, co-developing other products, and I actually never thought I would say this, but I have an engineering team and I'm designing and building some of my own products at this point in time. And so what we're really looking for, what we think is missing in the marketplace, are first of all, existing platforms and products that give us the type of access we want to our data, the data about how our students are performing. And this is really just, as far as we're concerned, just an absolute necessity that we need the data because it's got to integrate so we can see the whole picture of a student. The second piece we're looking for is really modular content across all subject areas. We want the ability to sort of select and pick and choose and reassemble and direct particular resources to students as needed. We also, surprisingly, did not find an LMS or a student dashboard or whatever you might want to call it that would think about allowing kids to sort of control and drive their own learning and give them actionable feedback, and that's the piece that we're building. We'd love to see it in the marketplace. And finally, we want everything to be, we want operability on all types of devices and platforms, including mobile. One of the ways we're going to close the gap between those who have access to digital learning is by providing it on mobile devices, and so that's critically important to us. So I'm going to stop there.
And one other question, just
Yes.
to give us your quick crystal ball on how you think this will play out over the next 5 to 10 years.
Well, if I have my way,
Go ahead.
the nation will look like this, and that this is the direction. I think K-12 is going to be disrupted, and either we're going to figure out how to do it, or kids and families are going to figure out how to do this themselves. And so, given the amount of traffic and the number of districts and states and counties that I see on a daily basis right now coming through my school, I would suggest that this is the future.
Yeah, great. Thank you. John?
Thank you. Hello, my name's John Covington, and I am the Chancellor. Well, let's put it this way. When I left Detroit, I was the Chancellor of the Education Achievement Authority, and this business changed so quickly without notice that might change by the time I get back. I hope not. But at any rate, I'm the Chancellor of the Education Achievement Authority of Michigan, a system of statewide schools that's responsible for transforming the state's persistently lowest achieving schools. This is very, very important work. We think that right now we're probably the most innovative and the most creative in the country in terms of changing persistently lowest achieving schools. The work is vitally, vitally important. We maintain that while we hear on the media each day about the challenges to our country's economic security, or national security, rather, whether it's Al-Qaeda, whether it's the use of chemical weapons in foreign countries. We maintain that while we don't deny that some of those things are certainly threats to our national security, we believe that the biggest threat to our national security is our continuous and egregious failure to ensure that America's young people are adequately educated to become what we're calling not college and career ready, but next generation ready. And to explain the importance, I guess, of what we do, I'd just like to share very quickly a little story. Consider if we were somehow able to resurrect Wally and Beaver Cleaver and their friend who lived across the street, Eddie Haskell, to walk the corridors of our schools or sit into our classrooms. The only thing that these three young men would find somewhat remotely odd is the ethnicity of the children in the building, and maybe even perhaps one of the things that they would find especially fascinating is the transistor radios or walkie-talkies that our current children are walking around the school with. Fast forward 3 decades, and we see Rudy, Theo, and Denise Huxtable, who were born into middle-class families. And although they were born in middle-class families, Theo Huxtable is academically challenged. And because he is, he concludes that he is somewhat stupid and says that to his family, to his parents' dismay, that education is not important, and so he'll just become a regular person. And then Denise Huxtable, somehow, although she goes to Hillman College, she drops out. And then their parents fail to understand or fail to acknowledge the innovation and creativity of little Rudy when she decides to take the family set of encyclopedias, cut it up to make a classroom project. And then fast forward to the current day, where our young people might appreciate, and I think they would, the genius of their forebears in the development of the telegram. But I think that they would find that it fails in comparison to the Instagram of their day. And so these 21st century digital native young people exit their mother's womb with an iPod in one hand, a cell phone in the other, and we want to maintain an agrarian kind of model of instructional program delivery that fails to meet their need. In a school district that's of 10,000 students, we acquired 15 schools at the beginning of the school year. We have a student population of about 10,000 students. Across 15 schools, 0% of these young people failed to score at the proficient level in the area of mathematics. 0 across 15 schools, 10,000 kids. 0% also in the area of reading. That's criminal. That's heinous. And so, in the Education Achievement Authority of Michigan, we have as a primary mission to use the Education Achievement Authority as a catalyst for change to serve as an intentional but constructive disruption to traditional public schooling and provide a scalable prototype for 21st century teaching and learning. And we've sought to serve as a disruption in several ways. First of all, we have moved to a student-centered model of public schooling where we have personalized learning in the manner that Karan talked about personalized learning this morning for each and every child. We have totally eliminated grade levels. If you come into one of our schools and you walk down the halls and you ask the child, what grade are you in? They're going to look at you like you're from Mars. We don't do grade levels. What we do is we have clearly defined instructional levels that children progress through whenever they have clearly demonstrated that they have mastered the requisite skill at one level to be successful at the next. With the student-centered approach, being sure that we're not only differentiating instruction, not only for the class, not only for the student, but we're also differentiating professional development through the use of technology for teachers. If we all believe that students learn at different paces and different styles and in different ways, we would also have to acknowledge that professional development for teachers would also have to be differentiated because they are at different places in their own teaching ability. We also, in the Education Achievement Authority, make sure that our teachers understand professional learning communities, that they form them not only within their school, but they are allowed to form professional learning communities outside their school, internal to the district, statewide, or even through the use of technology, professional learning communities that are also international so that they can learn from their international counterparts on best practices in ways of teaching children. And so as a result of our model and as a result of focusing on growth rather than the percentage of children who are able to pass some superficial state test, at the end of our first year, 68% of our children demonstrated that they achieved 2 years or more's growth in the area of mathematics, and 64% of them demonstrated they achieved 2 years or more's growth in the area of reading. We know that our model worked, but to get it to be scalable, we're going to have to rely on people like you to become strategic partners to make sure that our teachers are acquiring skill sets that they need and they have access to it to make sure that the students are being taught those skills and those standards that are aligned not only to Michigan Model Content standards, the Common Core, but to international standards as well, so that when they complete their secondary school experience, they complete that experience being next generation ready. So in a nutshell, that's what we do, and that's in terms of the story that I shared about the Cleaver brothers and the Huxtable children. That's why we do it, and that's why it's important, because we realize that the use of technology is absolutely essential in teaching a group of young people that's not wired the same way that we were wired when we were all in school.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, John. Karan.
It's definitely humbling to come and speak after hearing John and Diane, because they are practitioners on the front line of change and of helping students who otherwise wouldn't have this kind of opportunity. At Parthenon, we're just advisors. We're just management consultants. So we don't have that same awesome responsibility, and we don't get the same sort of satisfaction when you see the change. And I think the reason why Nelson and the organizers of EdNET asked us, or asked Parthenon or myself to come here, is to provide an international perspective. Because I don't work in the United States. I'm responsible for our education practice outside of the U.S., where we started with just 6 people in 2008, and today we have over 50 people working across 5 continents. And this year we will do over 100 engagements focused on emerging markets education. And so that's the world that I live and breathe in. And the challenges and the choices that some of these countries have to face are very different than what you would see in the United States. But that said, I do want to try to bring some of that international perspective and give you the story of one scale system that is working. And I'm not saying that the values or the decisions made by this system are applicable or relevant to the United States today. But, Andrew was describing, Diane's charter schools as the charter schools that could. Well, this is the little country that could. And what I'm going to talk to you about today is the Singapore story. Now, some of you may be familiar with Singapore, some of you may not. So let me give you a short primer on this remarkable country. And I'm not a Singaporean citizen, so, there's no owner's pride here. Singapore is about the size of Greater Boston. It has 4 million people. Singapore did not gain its independence. Singapore was thrown out of Malaysia in 1965 because it was so poor and because it was such a basket case. The fledgling country of Malaysia actually said that we can't handle this place. It's too far gone. It's too pointless. It doesn't even have its own water. It has no natural resources. This place is so pathetic that we want to get rid of it. And in the history of the 20th century, you will be hard-pressed to find a country that actually ejects voluntarily a province. That is how Singapore started. On its knees with nothing at all, no natural resources, no education system to speak of. Its economy entirely drove off one British naval base, which promptly after independence in 1965, the Brits announced they were going to shut down. Sounds like, not a great place to bet. Well, let's fast forward a little bit. Today, Singapore's income per capita is $52,000 per citizen. It is the wealthiest city in the world. And it continues to accelerate its economic growth away from the rest of the planet. In other words, they simply shot ahead in a way that nobody could imagine. And their education system has done the same thing. With these 4 million people, they have 2 universities in the top 100 globally ranked universities as per the Times Higher Education list. And those 2 universities are also the fastest growing in the rankings. That's remarkable, right? And their school system, which is what we're going to focus on here, is also remarkable. If you take the PISA scores, they're number 2 in math in the world, number 4 in science, number 5 in reading. In TIMSS, they're number 1 in math, number 2 in science, number 4 in reading. And this is a country that had nothing. Now, it gets better. They didn't achieve this result from 1965 to 2013. They had hit these rankings by the mid-90s. They did it in 30 years. They built from scratch, from being one of the poorest countries in the world, from picking rice off the street to where they are. It took them 30 years. It gets even better, which is if you take the top 10 list in PISA and TIMSS along these 3 categories, math, science, and reading, they are the only new country in the list. All the other countries, be they Canada, Finland, all the other countries in the list are countries which will have had legacy education systems to build on, that would have traditions of learning. But Singapore had nothing. So hopefully I've given you some sense of why the Singapore story is so interesting, even if by the time I'm through with it, none of it is applicable. Hopefully some of it will be. But when you hear how they did this, it's a story of values and choices. They made hard choices. They had to create a system that doesn't necessarily suit everybody's tastes, but produces these remarkable results with very little variance. And I think the way Andrew put it when we were talking about the panel was really great, which is, it's an integrated ecosystem. In other words, as I describe the system, think about Apple Computer. Think about how their whole model of having the software and the hardware being made by the same company allowed them to make products and deliver services that were far ahead of their competitors. That is exactly what Singapore did with its school system. So I'm going to describe a system that is completely integrated with the society around it, with the higher education system within this, and also within the K12 system. It's remarkably coherent as a school system. The first decision, or the first macro choice that Singapore made, is that if you are a Singaporean citizen, you may not attend a private school. It's that simple. If you're a Singaporean citizen, you must go to a Singaporean public school teaching the national curriculum. In other words, they didn't allow the wealthy to buy their way out of the Singapore school system. They said everybody is in here together. If you make $10 million a year or $10,000 a year, well, guess what? Your kids are going to be in the same system. So we all need to live in this world together. Deal with it. That was macro choice number one. They're going to get more and more specific as I describe them. The second component of the ecosystem, and this is something that they imported or just kept on from the British system, is the choice to have board exams. In other words, in the United States, you don't have these, but in the British system will have the GCSEs or the IGCSEs, and today, of course, the IB being an offshoot of that. And the French will have the BAC, and the Germans will have the Abitur. The Singaporeans not only maintained the board exam, but they introduced the board exam into the end of primary, in the middle of secondary, and at the end. Now, why is this important? Why is the board exam important? Because, number one, it keeps results away from the school. Teachers can't teach to the test if they don't know what's on the test. And teachers can't inflate grades if they're not involved in assessing the students and the board exam. Now, why is this important? Because the board exam, the universities in Singapore are told that they have to use the board exam for 95% of assessing a student's college readiness. So in other words, see how the system gets linked up. Everybody has to be in the same curriculum. Everybody has to do the board exam. The board exams are what gets you into college. And the colleges are told that pretty much if you're going to let a kid in who has a lower exam result than somebody else, well, you've got to go talk to the Prime Minister, because that ain't happening. And so NUS, which is their top university, gets the top kids, and literally it just slots in one after the other. And Singapore made a choice that only the top third of school graduates will go to university. Now, what does this do? This introduces a new level of system pressure. It basically says, okay, parents, if you want your kid to go to university, they pretty much have to graduate in the top third. But that means you have to make sure that not only are your kids doing well at school, but you're going to a good school. And now this introduces the next step in the ecosystem. Schools in Singapore are ranked based on these 3 standardized exams. And the rankings are made public to the extent that you can literally tell my kid is going to school 180, my kid is going to school 190. And if you don't want your kid to go to school 190, we'll move them to school 180, and funding for the school follows the student. So the schools have to fight for good students in order to go up the rankings. To go up the rankings means that more kids will go to college. And as you go up the rankings, as a school in Singapore, you're actually allowed to charge a small top-up fee to parents. And again, this is another important step in the ecosystem, because as I become a better school, I can charge, and again, it's not much. It's $100 a month, $200 a month. It's not enough to break the bank. But the point is, for the school loves it because it allows them to have more toys to play with. And so, and also within the school, the actual promotion from the head of school to the department heads is all related to the ranking of the school, which is made very transparent. So it's a system that creates intense pressure, there's no doubt about it, but it's a system that at the same time has generated these remarkable results. Now, there are some problems with this system, and I would be amiss if I didn't talk about them today, which is this system was very proficient in taking Singapore from practically the back of the bus to the front of the bus along these ratings. But as Singapore has become a developed economy, they actually are reorienting their system again. They're saying, okay, it's great we've got the basics, but now we're facing some problems. This system does not encourage creativity. And to become a knowledge economy, an innovation-driven economy, we need more creativity in the system. The second problem that they're facing is social mobility, where students who went to the best schools will now send their kids to those same best schools, again, at practically no charge, and it perpetuates itself. So the Singapore government, just earlier this year, announced that each school has a quota over, I think, 15% or 10% of students that may not have any previous linkage with the school. So in other words, your dad, your uncles, none of them can have gone to the school. And so it forces schools to admit diversity. And, you know, quite frankly, Singapore is having a tough time shifting away from this pressure cooker model, which, while it has created remarkable results, is probably not suited for the next stage of Singapore's development. But as we think about some of the challenges that I hear about school systems where we're going from relatively low levels of attainment to you know, higher levels of attainment, some of the lessons in the Singapore story around transparency, around having the courage to hold people accountable, to say that, you know what, rankings are tough stuff, but why not? You know, it is just the truth. Some of these lessons perhaps are applicable. And they certainly are better than what we see in other emerging economies. You know, we work a lot in the Middle East, and so, you know, one of the countries, or it's sort of a country, it's semi-autonomous, is Abu Dhabi. And in Abu Dhabi, they said, you know what, we've got really low levels of attainments, but bucket loads of money. So slightly different situation from Singapore. And the way that they dealt with it is they said, well, Finland gets these awesome results. Well, yep. Well, why don't we open a Finnish school of Abu Dhabi? And that's what they did. They also decided that their students have relatively low levels of discipline. So they found this guy, or this guy found them, and said, well, the way you fix the discipline problem is you should teach them jiu-jitsu. So they have another school in Abu Dhabi that's a model school where kids are taught Brazilian jiu-jitsu all day with a few hours of classes in the evening. That also didn't work out. So the dilemma around, you know, attainment, I think, and improving performance, in the end, there are these choices around values that you will need to make. And you know, again, I'm not suggesting that the Singapore story has all the right choices for America, but they have made some of the right choices. Thank you.
Thanks.
Great. So a hand for, yes. So, Vicki, where are we time-wise? Do we have, is it all right? Okay. If I could follow up with each of you with a question, and then out there, if you've got any burning questions in you that you want to put to the panel collectively or individually, just make your way to the two microphones, and we'll try to leave time for you. Diane, just so everyone has a really good picture in their head, can you spend just a couple of minutes describing a student's experience of a day in your schools now that they have made this turn? What does that look like?
And maybe I'll do 30 seconds of the week because different days of the week look different. So Monday through Thursday, our students will come in the morning and they will do what we call Summit Reads. So they're on Gobstopper, which is an e-reader platform with curriculums. I think we're the first school in the nation this fall, as far as I know, that actually leased individual texts for kids on an e-reader. They'll move then into a whole series of projects-based deep learning that are displayed on and work submitted on and curated in a digital portfolio on the Show Evidence platform. Those are facilitated by teachers and highly interactive. They've got their dashboard all day long that's showing them where they are on those projects and connecting their content knowledge to it. And so there's times through the day where they'll be logging on to playlists and figuring out exactly what they need to know and practicing that with a variety of different resources that they select. And then crowdsource their feelings about responses too. On Fridays, that's what their day looks like all day long. They set goals in a cycle of what they're going to do and what they're going to learn, and they reflect on that. And they also have individual conferences with their mentor who stays with them for multiple years to talk about those goals and think about those goals and make sure they're making adequate progress. And then 8 weeks of the year, they're literally immersed in the community in hands-on, immersive, real-world, authentic experiences.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
John, if you could describe what you've had to produce with the Brain Honey platform, just because I have a feeling everyone in this room will be intrigued hearing you describe it a bit.
Sure. The Brain Honey platform, we partnered with the School Improvement Network and Agilix to develop education platform that we call Buzz. Buzz is loaded with both proprietary and open source, open resources that are tightly aligned to Michigan Model Content Standards, the Common Core, and international standards as well. And from the initial assessment, students are provided with an individualized learning plan that they progress through at their own rate and not necessarily by the amount of time that they sit in the seat. They have several days where they conference with teachers. They have a board in each classroom that says, where am I? I'm just getting started. I need additional help, or I'm already an expert. For those children who reach expert status on a particular standard, then they are free to help their peers with the learning process as well. So teachers are not the only individual within the classroom where other students can learn from. So they're also able to learn from their peers. So it's a very, very dynamic and innovative approach to making sure that students are learning at their own pace, that they don't have to wait on peers if their peers are not at the same place at the same time on the same day. And so when they then take assessments, the data dashboards that they have give teachers real-time information about where children are at all times, with also information as to what they can do to help the children overcome the deficiencies that's cited by the assessments that they give.
Great. So I hope you're seeing the secret agenda that we have up here and having these two on this panel. What you're hearing about is that they are leading practitioners and school and system designers for this kind of work, moving their schools and their kids' experience towards competency-based, mastery-based progression. There's a huge opportunity for build-out in that space because we've done 80 to 90 years of the other kind. And so all this space, this is just raw, new, invented stuff. You're changing and adapting this on a week-to-week basis.
Yep.
Karan, what was the role of the provider marketplace in Singapore in helping to support the outcomes that they got to over there? And today, if you walked into a Singaporean school, to what degree are they using materials home-baked by Singaporean companies versus global ones, including US-based ones, versus something else?
I mean, this is where I think the Singapore story may be slightly disappointing to people in this room, in that the system doesn't have a lot of private participation at all. The system really is about public schools, public school teachers, and a very government-mandated delivery. In fact, quite frankly, it's a very low-tech system. It does not involve a lot of technology. It does not involve giving kids fob loads of iPads. I mean, if you've ever lived or been in Asia, you know that most Asian kids will have 3 mobile phones and smartphones by the time they're 10 years old. I mean, they don't need to be taught technology. They're all kind of techno freaks. But the point is that the school system and Singapore's agenda is not tech-heavy. And the way that they deal with even things like customization of the curriculum actually follows the old German model where they stream kids very early on. So if you remember, I mentioned that they have the 3 board exams at different points in the way. And just like in Germany, where you get streamed into a Gymnasium, Hauptschule, Realschule based on your competency, Singapore does the same thing. It keeps sorting and streaming the kids based on their competence. Right. And that's how they deal with customization of the curriculum to a particular ability. And so, in this regard, I think that the opportunity for the private provider in this regard is more to think about what the Singapore system has done well and export it. So, for example, one famous Singapore export is Singapore Maths, sure, which Singapore sells to the rest of the world. And an opportunity is, can you think of a way which through technology, through process design, through operations, that you can take a microcosm of what they do so well in terms of managing student cohorts, in terms of looking at student progression and taking it and rolling it into part of a school system here in the United States. The actual Singaporean implementation of it, because it's grown organically over 30 or 40 years, doesn't really require third-party assistance to a great degree, right, and it doesn't require much technology at all.
Right. Okay. Thanks. We have a question out here. Yeah.
Yeah, Frank Catalano. Diane, this one is to drill down a bit on what you said were market needs in the education market, that you hadn't found products you liked. And I understand two of the areas pretty well. The third one, data, student performance, yeah, I understand that as well. The one I'm curious about is the curriculum and modular curriculum that can be mixed and put together for individual students, and I think you said in all subject areas. There are probably several companies in this room who say, but wait, we do that. Oh. What's wrong with the solutions that you've seen so far?
Well, they're not modular. So my survey of the market and my organization survey is that in general they're closed systems. So you want me to buy a whole package, so I need to buy a whole course, and it's got to go in your order, and I have to do it with your assessments. I can't pick and pull and choose specific resources, the vast majority of the stuff on the market seems to be in math and English language arts, and I'm not finding extensive content in foreign language, in science and history, and we're looking at other streams as well, financial literacy, although there's quite a bit on the market in that.
So it's less about, say, OER chunks, and I'm just going to use OER as an example, and more about the fact the range of coverage and subject areas for modular content.
It's the range, but let's be clear, there is not modular content out there. I have one paid for modular content that's working on my playlists, and our playlists are curated across all 5 subjects, grades 6 through 12, from open resources that we've developed, and only one that actually fits that model that I can really pull content in.
Just to pick up on Diane's comment, and I know I just said I don't do work in the U.S., but I do the occasional project. But we did an engagement last year where earlier this year, where we surveyed 2,000 American public school teachers, and we asked them, amongst other things, what kind of digital services and content they use. And it's interesting, on the one hand, the survey showed a much greater use of digital in classrooms than we expected, but what was surprising is, to back up Diane's point, they were picking and choosing very specific things to go into their digital binder. So, for example, if there was one very enthusiastic math teacher that had put up a great lesson plan on matrix math, they'll go and download this one specific lesson plan over Pearson's super program, which connects everything in the world together. And we saw teachers picking these ultra-specific, sometimes free amateur websites put up by other teachers, sometimes even by students, and building a whole curriculum out of 80 different sources for a given subject. And we saw this behavior in our survey, which was statistically a significant, large survey.
All of this connects to the procurement discussion in the before lunch session and the disaggregation of purchasing that we're already starting to see and that we'll probably pick up. John?
And I'd also like to add, the other thing I think about these packets is, in terms of flexibility for teachers, they certainly need to be more flexible, but they certainly also need to be kind of agnostic in nature, so that one is able to talk to another in spite of vendor, so that when teachers are doing various assessments, then they can do analysis pulling from both, yes, to better provide students with a program for individual learning paths and or deficiencies.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you. Question over here?
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Marilyn DiCallo. I have a question regarding the integration of perhaps digital resources that align with behavior or social and emotional learning. We know that school is a place for social development as well as academic development, and wondering how your programs or what your thinking is about addressing those competencies as well.
Right now, our buzz system that I described earlier only addresses the academic side of the house. But last year was our first year of implementing the Education Achievement Authority in terms of having schools. Throughout the course of the year, we recognize that we're going to have to take buzz now through a new iteration, so to speak, or the next iteration, because the platform as it is only addresses the academic side, and we all know that there are so many more things that go into making sure that children get an education, particularly from the social side of the house, behavior, and health and wellness. So we're in the process now of looking for vendors that can help us develop, in cooperation with Agilix and School Improvement Network, that side of what it is we do. Because
and our platform that we've launched this fall that we've built, called our Personalized Learning Plan, does just that. That's one of the reasons we had to build it ourselves, is there wasn't something that was addressing this side. And so just even the design of the platform, where students literally go in and set their goals and reflect on them, and the platform tracks their goals. Goal setting is a big part of Habits of Success. They actually can document the decisions they're making and have a lot of choice in how they make decisions, and we can track that and then relate it to outcomes, which is, again, Habits of Success. We can track their persistence, how long they're on task, all of these types of things that relate to Habits of Success. And it's linked to a whole rubric that spells out all of these behaviors that we're looking to grow in. This is a really open field. Even the researchers who are most engaged in this, it's very early on, but a really, really open field. And we haven't found anything out there that's doing anything along these lines that really.
Great. Well, thank you. I appreciate your answers.
Great. So for those of you who want to learn more about what these models look like, you can find a lot of good information at the following couple of sites. nextgenlearning.org is the site for the Next Gen Learning Challenges. You'll find there links to 2-page profiles of each of the first 40 schools that are being created in this mode. You'll see that they all share a set of common attributes, but they have 40 different flavors for how they're pursuing the design and implementation of those attributes. If you want to really visit the absolute front lines of what this is looking like, go to blendmylearning.com, which is a joint initiative of Next Gen Learning Challenges, the Silicon Valley Schools Foundation, the Christensen Institute, and Gates. And it really is straight from the trenches discussion from the people who are leading and working in these schools. You'll hear teacher voices, student voices sometimes, and CEO and principal voices, all talking about what they're learning. What does this look like in this space? And Summit has its own website, which is
summitps.org.
Summitps.org. And
eafmichigan.org.
Great. Okay.
Yeah. One of the things that one other thing I'd just like to mention, when we're having these kind of discussions about how we bring models up to scale and those kind of things, one of the things that we very seldom talk about is the need for K12 systems and also vendors to partner with colleges of education across the nation, so that when teacher graduates are coming out of college, they also come with some knowledge as to how to utilize technology as teaching and learning tools in the classroom. Inasmuch as those of us in K12 systems have been slow to change, colleges of education across the country have also been slow to change in terms of how they teach and train teachers to come out and be prepared to teach in 21st century classrooms.
Great. So let's close by asking each of you just in 2 or 3 sentences. I mean, here you've got this beautiful, captive audience, and you are so beautiful from where we sit here. This is the provider marketplace, I mean, here they are. And you 2 practitioners have this opportunity to let them leave this room with one piece of advice just ringing in their ears. So this is your opportunity to do that. And then, Karan, I'll ask you to be our closer on this and either comment on what they said or some other brilliant wrap to the whole thing. You have
wow,
two whole
no
people,
pressure, no pressure.
two whole people to work through before I ask you to do that. So, Diane?
It's a tough choice, but if I have to pick one, I have to have access, like real, live, reasonable access to the data that's produced when I'm using your products or systems, and I need to be able to take it into my system and do what I need to with it when I want, on demand, automated. And that just doesn't exist in this marketplace right now.
Great. Thanks.
I would certainly request for teachers flexibility in use, that they can pick and choose from what you have to offer to have a positive effect on their instructional delivery in the classroom, and also that be a little bit more flexible in having your software packages or apps or what have you be flexible enough to talk to others, although it might not necessarily be a product that was produced by your company.
See, I got a 2-for-1 because he said that one that I...
See, yeah, 2 for 1. And Karan, bring us home.
And I'd like to put out a challenge to everybody here, which is I hope that we're here not just to make money on education, but to think of education as a social good. And as you think about that, the challenge I'd like to put out here is how do we benefit most of the kids in the world who happen to be in very poor emerging markets? India has 260 million kids in school. That's almost the population of your country. Most of these kids are in public schools that spend a total of $30 a year per child. And so my challenge to you is, what can you put in the marketplace that can be used in an environment of that scale, but also at that price, that will impact hundreds of millions of lives?
There's a challenge for you. Okay, everyone, help me thank our panelists. Really appreciate it. You guys, thank you, and thank all of you.
Just an excellent presentation. Congratulations to you on all the good work all of you are doing. We have a 30-minute break, and then we'll be back in here for the next session.